Hi, this is O'Connor. Welcome back. And I've got a great set of answers to the questions that were posed at the end of week 3, at the end of week 4. Let's get into the week 3 questions. And just as a reminder, what did we cover? We actually covered the supplier competitive market framework, which can apply to any emerging economy suppliers, not just Chinese suppliers. And that framework was all about the pressures that was placed on suppliers by competitive markets, either foreigners moving into China, competing with the suppliers domestically, or actually competing in international markets when foreign customers are just so much more demanding than their domestic counterparts. But here's a question from one student at the end of week 3. Thinking from the supplier's view, will it be better than the customer's view? Look, at the end of the day, you are in a partnership with the supplier. And until you get the product that is fit for the purpose that your customers are buying that product for, and they're happy and they come back and it builds your brand, then you are dependent on that supplier. It's not a supply chain, and managing suppliers is not a one-shot deal. If it's not a one-shot deal, that is, you're going to have further orders, future orders again with the supplier, then you really do need to know the supplier's view, because the supplier can give you the perfect deal on that first time you contact them, and then 6 months later, gone. All right, poof. You can't see them anymore and they're gone. So this is why it's so important to really get to understand the supplier. What is the mentality of the owner of the supplier? Why is that supplier in the business that they are in? Are they in it just for the money, or are they in it to actually develop, maybe learn from you and develop their own brand name in years to come? But in the meantime, you're working with a rock solid partnership where they're actually making products for your brand, but you know that you're teaching them so they can become independent in 2 years' time or 3 years' time. And so you're actually giving that supplier a future viable strategy, and in the short term you have your needs met because you want to get supply to the market for the best price. And so this is why you need to think in terms of the supplier's view. If you don't know what the supplier is thinking, then 9 times out of 10 you're going to be in trouble on the second order and the third order. Next question. Can the response mentioned above be different for different products? Maybe certain buyers emphasize product differentiation. It depends on the customer market. Yes, of course. The more complex the product, the more critical it is that you have a supplier that is in the game with you in a partnership for the long term, because product complexity requires much more investment, joint investment, you and the supplier, in the tooling. And so therefore, and much more investment in the IP, the intellectual property. And so it's very important that you understand the supplier even more. But if it's just a simple product, maybe it's just a plastic stirrer that goes in your teacup. Okay, so this could be a 1 or 2 shot deal that you buy from the supplier and you never see them again. So there are different horses for courses. It depends on the product. It depends on the market you're selling to. If you're selling to the European US market, the product compliance standards of the supplier's factory are much higher. They are rigorous, especially if there is an electrical product involved, especially if there is a medical product involved, especially if there is some different types of substances or chemicals in that product involved. So you've got the REACH and RoHS standards in Europe that require you to certify the factory, or the factory to certify that they do not have too many, they are below the tolerances for the harmful substances that go into your product. Next question. With the action points of the Chinese supplier behavior differences, how long is it estimated to take for the suppliers to change their view on short-term to long-term? Okay, so this is a question about, well, how long does it take for suppliers to learn? Well, over the last 30 years, suppliers have been learning a lot. But the thing that complicates the learning for suppliers is that their option to consolidate and get larger beyond their own family, beyond their own network, is very limited. Whereas in the West, if we are facing bankruptcy, if we are facing challenges for competition, we may see merger as an option to be sustainable in the long term. That is not a first best solution in the mind of a Chinese supplier. So in some ways, that may actually take them longer to change from a short-term view to a long-term view, because a long-term view is you must grow in order to survive. You may need to partner in order to survive. You may need to share your business in order to survive. And that is not necessarily in the DNA of small SME suppliers in China and in a lot of other developing economies. Next, in week 3, we also considered all of the surveys, thousands of suppliers that I have surveyed with students more recently in the trade shows in Hong Kong. And an example is shown here where we ask, what is your number one challenge and how you're responding to that challenge? Now, why do we ask those two simple questions? It really gets to the heart of what the priorities of the supplier are. Is their priority just to get their product sold, or is their priority to improve the quality of their product? And so the question is raised by one student: regarding the challenges faced by China's suppliers, would most of them accept the idea of improving the quality if that would increase or erode their profits? I don't think they see that as a connection. What they do see as a connection is if they are selling direct to a customer overseas, that is a consumer market. When I talked to those suppliers that had their own brand and they were selling their own product directly into the consumer market, they did find one of their 3 top challenges is to be quality. But when I talk to suppliers that are supplying a component to a brand as an OEM manufacturer, they're supplying a component, so they're not supplying the final product, and they're not seeing the final customer. They don't seem to care about quality that much. They seem to think that, oh, that's the customer's responsibility, that is the B2B buyer, the importer of record in the other country. That's their responsibility to deal with. If something goes wrong, they're responsible. That's not on us. And so that's why when we ask those suppliers who are just supplying components, their top 3 challenges is normally competition, cost control, or something related to their profit margins or technology, but very rarely is it quality. And so that's the biggest difference that I have seen in the challenges faced by suppliers in my interviews. Next question: will China supplier be honest in sharing their constraints to fulfill their first-time customer's order? What do you mean by being honest? Being honest is maybe sharing everything, being transparent about everything. It's very hard to get a supplier to be completely transparent in the early stages of a relationship. And it's not just Chinese suppliers, could be other emerging economy suppliers as well. They have their own systems, they have their own approaches to doing business. And a customer comes to them and wants full transparency, then that may turn them off and they may not want to sell to that customer anyway. So don't expect the supplier to be completely honest. And it's for you, the customer, to get to know the supplier, to understand the demeanor of the supplier, to understand the potential of the supplier to be honest, rather than try and guess whether they are honest or not. Get to know the owner of the supplier. Is the owner in the business for the long term? And if they know that you are in business with them for the long term, that multi-orders, it's more likely they will see the benefits of being transparent and honest with you, the customer. Next question, does the supplier opportunity to copy or infringe intellectual properties of their client is one of the supplier motivation to improve the overall operation and quality? I see these as separate. I don't think that is a motivation to improve the overall operation and quality. The opportunity to copy or infringe intellectual properties of their client is directly related to their opportunity to actually develop their own product and sell it domestically without you knowing, or to develop their own product and sell it into another market without you knowing. And they could do all of that without change in their operations or change in their quality. So I don't see the connection between quality. And as I said before, the suppliers I have spoken to who have cared about quality are two types. Number one, they're the suppliers that are actually selling the final product directly into overseas markets. So they really know that quality matters. They are the importer of record themselves. And number two, if the suppliers, the owner of the supplier, wants to make the best product in the world. In other words, they have a product here, but next year it's going to be product Mark II, and next year it's going to be product Mark III. They want to continually improve that product year on year on year, and rather than toss and turn from product to another product just because there's a different opportunity this year compared to last year. Finally, for week 3, a question was asked because we did cover India. We have Megla come in and speak to us for 1 hour all about India's market, the challenges of working with suppliers in India. And the question was, does India's suppliers benefit if the world's trend continue to go further towards sustainable or biodegradable materials? I think India's suppliers benefit. I think suppliers in all developing countries, emerging economies, can benefit. It matters. It really depends on the owner's strategy and whether they want to develop a niche in this area in the long term. Because just because you want a product with sustainable or biodegradable materials, it doesn't mean that you cannot make that product cheaply in an emerging economy. The big difference when we talked about whether you're sourcing locally in USA or Europe versus going overseas to an emerging economy to source your product is whether you need that product to the market very, very quickly. And whether the value of that product is high or low. If the value of the product is very, very low, and it can be with factories in emerging economies, then it's more likely that India suppliers will benefit, Chinese suppliers will benefit, suppliers in other developing economies can benefit. So that wraps up week 3, in which we actually really started to get into the supplier's mind in terms of the challenges they are facing, their responses to those challenges. We had a research paper presented in week 3, and that was very, very critical for you to understand what is the supplier's mindset, their likely strategy, in preparation for you to go into negotiation with them, which was what we cover in week 4. So stay tuned and let's get into week 4, shall we? Back again. Week 4. And in week 4, it was all about negotiation. Yes, negotiation. I'm going to beat this supplier in negotiation because I have a Harvard business degree. No one can beat me. All right. If the price is $1 and I want 80 cents, and I'm going to pound my fist until I get 80 cents, or we split the difference and I'm going to walk away and win the deal. That does not work in supply chain relationships. That is completely anti-theoretical to developing a relationship and a partnership with your supplier. That is a one-shot deal where you take this Harvard Business School approach to negotiation, partner. That is, you go into negotiations with the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. In other words, you go in with lots more alternatives, so that gives you power to walk away, and then suddenly you're going to get a better deal. That does not help you in the long run. Instead, what helps you in the long run is to get to understand the price that the supplier is offering you. You want 80 cents, the supplier says $1 for every teacup. You want to understand, okay, Mr. Supplier, you want $1, okay, so what are the materials part of that dollar? What are the overheads part of the dollar? Do you understand other costs you're incurring to make that? And maybe it costs the supplier 90 cents. Mr. Supplier, you're only going to make 10 cents margin on each product, and I'm only going to order 10,000. So that's only $1,000 you're going to make from me. Mr. Supplier, how is that going to be sustainable? Mr. Supplier, how are you going to be interested in taking a second order from me for $1? I think, Mr. Supplier, on the second order, if I was you, I would put the order up to $1.20 or $1.30 so I can continue to supply you high quality products for every one of your orders. That's being empathetic with the supplier. You're looking beyond the first order with the supplier, and that is critical. That is so critical in negotiations. Let's see what questions you had for week 4. What should I do when there is a big difference between the purchase quotation and the actual price? Now, I'm trying to think about what you're saying here, the purchase quotation, what they're quoting you, and the actual price. That is maybe the price you want to, the purchase quotation, or the purchase that the buyer wants to pay, and the price that the supplier wants. Or explain that when there's a big difference. It's the last thing you want to do is say, well, you're saying $1.20, I'm saying $1, let's split the difference. That is the last resort. Before you even do that, you want to understand, why is the supplier saying $1.20? Maybe they're saying $1.20 because their cost of operations and materials and everything add up to $1. And if they give it to you for $1 or $1.10, they're not going to make any money. And so you may win on the first order, but you're not going to win on the second order, the third order, and so on. Next question, does the 3-circle control framework apply to suppliers, factories, and other countries? Of course it does. The 3-circle control framework helps you as an SME buyer to compartmentalize the 3 challenges you have in any supply chain relationship. The first challenge is the relationship with that supplier, understanding their strategy, the business model of that supplier. Until you understand the business model, the strategy, how are they making money, it's very unlikely you can present to them a long-term proposal where you're going to give them multiple orders that fits in with that strategy. How could you present the supplier something if you do not know what their business model is? And that's the 3-circle control framework helps you to think about that separate from, Mr. Supplier, we now have a deal. Shake my hand. Thank you very much. Oh, yes. Okay, now we've got to sign the contract. Okay, so we've got to sign the contract. And that's the second circle. Now we get into, okay, I've decided, Mr. Supplier, you are the one. I just want to verify that your business is who you say you are. I just want to verify that your bank account is the factory, is the business. So when I send money to that bank account, then you actually receive that money. Okay. So, this due diligence is really, really critical, because it's so easy to think that you have that perfect supplier that is telling you everything about their strategy. In the end, you send the money and you get a box of rocks, or you send your money and you get nothing. And we cover that in week 5, and it does actually happen. So that's why the second circle is important. And the third circle is important. Why? Because it's all about measurement, verification, and checking the product that is being made by the supplier, and that it conforms with the golden sample that you have agreed to for the supplier to make for you. So that's how the 3-circle control framework helps you to step by step work through the issues you need to work through in order to have a successful supply of the order that you have entered into a contract with the supplier with. Finally, what could be an excellent way to negotiate? The first excellent way to negotiate, and that was a big thing I wanted to take away in week 4, and that is always question. Why? Can you tell us more? Mr. Supplier, can you tell us about your material costs? Mr. Supplier, can you tell us about your labor costs? And many people, buyers, think that suppliers will not tell you that. They will tell you that if you are genuinely interested in that. You are interested in that not because you can get a cheaper price, it's because you want to understand 2 things. Number 1, maybe there's a way that you can help them improve their costs. Number 1. Number 2, you can help to understand the challenge they may have in the second order and the third order if you really see or sense that their margins they're offering you on the first order are razor thin because they just want to get that order. It's very unlikely that they're going to offer the same margins in the second order and the third order. So that was that part of week 4. Now we go on to more questions in week 4. And the next one was all about expanding. We talked about expanding that conversation you have with the supplier. And then, Mr. Supplier, tell us about the costs of what it costs to make what you make. And thinking about how you as a buyer can help them save costs. Can they save costs by having some material inspection? Can they save costs by improving the operations in the assembly process? Wow. Can you do that? Of course you can. You're the buyer. You're there. You're negotiating with them. You want to go one step further and think about, by the time you're asking questions about their costs and everything like that, maybe if you can help them save 5 cents in the dollar for every unit they supply you, maybe you can take a cut of half of that saving. And that's a different approach to negotiation than saying, oh, I'll give you $1. The supplier wants $1.20. Let's split it in 2. No, Mr. Supplier, I see it's $1.20. Let's see if we can save you 10 cents of the costs of that product you're selling to me for $1.20. And if I can save you 10 cents, maybe we can share the difference. That's a different approach of sharing the difference than sharing the difference of what the supplier wants and what you are willing to give. You see, sharing the difference of a cost saving together is sharing the spoils of a partnership where actually you are helping the supplier not only supply you are helping the supplier be sustainable for them to supply other buyers. Wow. So, your help to them goes beyond your order, goes beyond your little contract. That's what we are talking about in week 4. Next question, how much? So the question here, the first question, how much would negotiation strategies differ by product? Of course, if the product is more complex, then you need to understand the complexity a little bit more, and there may be less transparency for a complex product because there's areas that supplier has technical know-how that you don't, and they may shield or hide from you different components that go into that particular assembly. And that's may take a little bit longer to get to know the supplier if it's a complex product. Overlaid with that, with a complex product, it's likely there's there's IP involved, and so then you need to get to know the supplier even more because you want to make sure that you can protect your IP, and the supplier will not just sell a copy of your product out the back door domestically. Next question, which is more important, price or quality? when it comes to your conversation with the supplier, quality is critical. But I would say it's not necessarily price or quality. Which is more important is actually the cost to the supplier of supplying you the good that you are ordering. Because the price is something you can pull out of the air, but the cost will never go away. The supplier has to pay wages to the workers, has to pay rent, electricity, water, gas. Okay, it has to pay raw materials. It has to pay labor for inspection of the raw materials. And that is what is important. All of those elements of cost. I'm an accountant, but this is very operational. This is very transactional in some ways, but it's very transformational because it changes the way you have a dialogue with your supplier. Mr. Supplier, let's talk about costs. Rather than Mr. Supplier, let's talk about price. Totally different. Because with price, you cannot make improvements on price, but you can make improvements on cost, where both people win. Next question. Is a long-term relationship with the supplier more important or the current deal breaking more important? The long-term relationship is always more important. If you are so excited or so determined to go direct to the supplier, and that is bypassing the middleman that will charge you 20-25% more for a product off the shelf. No, Mr. I want to go directly to the supplier. I want to save that 20%. I want to save that 25%. I want to go straight to the supplier. If you want to do all of that and if you want to do all the things the middleman does for you, don't you think all that effort that you're going to do in going direct to the supplier, that means you've got to do your own due diligence, you've got to do your own contracting, you've got to do your own verification, you've got to do your own factory visit, your factory audit, QC audit, you've got to do all that. You've got to arrange everything here. It's going to cost you money. Do you think you really want to do this for a once-only deal? For a once-only deal where you get the best price? I don't think so. The long-term relationship, it's not about, okay, you think about the long-term relationship with a person-to-person relationship, but we're talking about a long-term ordering, reordering relationship. Okay, so it's a long-term transactional relationship. You're having many transactions over time. It's the transactions that the supplier likes. They may not like you, but they like you when you say that you commit to giving them 3 orders in the next 6 months. They like you when you commit to giving 6 orders in the next 12 months. Okay. So the one-shot deal never pleases anyone. The long-term relationship is all about you committing to giving orders with the supplier. You committing to helping the supplier save costs, which the supplier can benefit from his or her orders from other customers. Just beyond your orders alone. Next question. Let's go on. Because in week 4, we talked about the consequences if you did not focus on this relationship and did not focus on, well, Mr. Supplier, you asked $23. What are your costs here? Is it going to be 23 on the second or third order? Maybe you don't ask that, but you just ask them, how much money are they making? Can we help you make a greater margin on the first order? And if you can give me a better margin on the first order, what do you mean? If I can help you make a better margin on first order by helping you make some operational improvements, by helping you saving on raw material checking. You don't do it, but I want you to do it. It'll cost you a little bit, but you actually save more because there's less rejects after assembly, which has labor and overhead attached to it. If I can help you in this way, Mr. Supplier, when I do my second order and third order, can we keep the same price? You see, you don't just ask blindly, oh, $23. Oh, can you give me 23 on the second and third order? Well, you got to give the supplier something. Give the supplier something to look forward to, not just orders, but give them something to look forward to in terms of ideas you can help them to be more sustainable. Or maybe they give you $23 in the second order and third order, and if you're able to help them with some ideas to give them higher margin, they're making more money on the second order and the third order because you have saved them some labor costs. You have saved them some reject costs. That's it. Okay, so this is very, very important where we talk about the fact that a supplier will get you on the second order and the third order. You may always win on the first, but be careful because that will bite you if you just do not look beyond the price they offer you. The question that was asked, what are the steps that need to be taken in the business world to facilitate a more effective buyer-supplier relationship? So the steps are getting to know. The steps are having a common thing to talk about. The common thing to talk about between you, Mr. Supplier, and me, the buyer, is the cost of making this product. The common thing is not the price, because Mr. Supplier, you want a higher price. Me, I want a lower price. That's not common. But what is common is the cost of making the product. So focus on that all the time, and you'll find the negotiations will go much more smoothly, because if you can help them save money on the costs, then that will help the supplier in its orders from other buyers as well. So that is really, really critical in developing the relationship, because the costs always get in the road of a lot of other promises that are made, and they may require the supplier to walk back promises. And on the second order, they suddenly put the price up. Then why did you put the price up? Because the material prices went up 20%. My material suppliers charge me 20%. I have to pass them on to you. Sorry, Mr. Buyer, it's out of my control. Okay, you can avoid that by having these conversations when you talk about the costs from the get-go. Okay, because that may not be the only excuse they give you. It may be other reasons. It's because they maybe have given you a so lower price to begin with. Next question. How do we deal with a supplier that seems hesitant in giving information? Like I said earlier, you must get to know them and focus on talking about cost. Explain to them, if I can understand your cost, if I can help you save money, then that's a win-win relationship. I'm not here to help you for my benefit alone. I want you to benefit as well. And so the more we talk about cost-saving activities, ideas, then that will make the supplier interested in giving you more information. That's the reason why you want to talk about costs, not because you want a lower price on the first order. Maybe it's because you want the same price on the second order and the third order, because you and I know that over time, costs go up over time. They're always going up. That's economics of the world. So that's inflation. And we've been in inflation like this for a long, long, long time. So given that, then you make costs the art of your negotiation, the platform for your negotiation. Next question. Beware of the supplier power. Why would the supplier want to increase the price in the second and third orders from buyers? What's the rationale behind that? Well, like I just said, maybe the materials that are coming into the supplier went up by 20% from one month to the next. Maybe one of their suppliers went bankrupt. Suddenly, they have to go to another supplier, and that supplier has limited capacity, but you want the same lead time because that's what they contracted with you for, and then they have to pay more materials. And so obviously they're going to have to pass it on to you. Maybe they are giving you a good deal to start with to get your business. They're game playing. Yes, they do that. There's suppliers that do that. And that's where you need to understand the supplier right at the start. Are they game playing? And what is the potential for cost to increase over time? So have a conversation about, do they have ideas about how they can manage costs that will go up over time, because you want to help them. And that's what you need to think about. And so, there's nothing crazily new about this example here where the supplier went from $23 and the next shipment was 26. And even though a Model B was another one, it actually went up to 28. But Model B was a little bit better, but not enough to say that it was $5 more than the original Model A FOB price. And, this is what happens. You need to have a conversation with the supplier about the costs. So that was a big theme in negotiations, about questioning, and getting to know, how is the supplier making money? How is the supplier running a sustainable business? Because you as a buyer, you need a sustainable business partner. Sustainable meaning that they can continue to operate even in the face of labour costs going up 15% per year, even in the face of material prices going up over time, even in the face of utility charges going up over time. Okay, you need to be able to manage through that process. You need to know that the supplier has a sustainable business model of continuous improvement, knowing that the supplier will be able to manage cost increases in the future through continuous improvement processes, so that not all of those cost increases are passed on to you. Better still, if you can play a role in helping the supplier in that continuous improvement process, then it's likely they will not pass all of the costs on to you, of the remaining cost increases, because they know that you have been a partner with them in helping making their business sustainable. And that's what it is. Negotiation in the supply chain is about sustainability. It is about managing a sustainable relationship. Sustainable meaning a viable business model for both parties. That's it. Week 4, negotiation. Week 3, supplier challenges, the mind of the supplier. Together, formidable information to make you a much better negotiator. This is O'Connor. Look forward to seeing you in week 5. Bye for now.